Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. I figured we might as well go live. Just kind of talk about the markets and everything. So let me post this in the various places, and we will jump in. Okay. All right. Um, so Bitcoin's coming in at just below 17K. Obviously, not a whole lot of new things going on at the moment, um, but as always, the macro is still stuck in traffic on Struggle Street, and we're sort of figuring out what the S&P is going to do. The VIX, by the way, I don't know if you follow the VIX. The VIX is actually at around where it was back in August when it got close to its local top back then. So the local top back in August, mid-August, the VIX got to around 19 or so. That's where it is right now. We also see the S&P 500 sort of at a fairly interesting resistance level. Doesn't mean it has to hold as resistance, but I mean, if you're the person who sells down here and buys every time we get to the top of the trend line, then you're clearly doing something wrong, right? I mean, try not to fall for that trap, because if you do, then you sell at bottoms, you buy at tops, and you just end up losing all your money throughout the bear market. But again, we just did a video on this yesterday, posted a video late last night where we looked at the S&P 500 and kind of compared it to various bear markets. There was one chart I meant to talk about in that video, and because I forgot to do it, I just want to go ahead and quickly do it now. And that is actually looking at the comparison of the S&P 500 and looking at sort of like a lot of the bear markets that have preceded it. Not necessarily, just sort of looking at the extent of the bear markets, the ones that continue to be bear markets, and this is where we currently are within the context of prior bear markets that were still in motion as a bear market. So as of right now, you could argue we're sort of near the upper part of the general range that the S&P 500 would be in during a bear market. But do note that if we do get another leg down, it's still well within the context of historical bear markets for the S&P 500. And so these are important considerations. And I mean, I don't want to say that new lows on the S&P necessarily have to lead to new lows on Bitcoin, but there is certainly some evidence that, with Bitcoin still really struggling to figure out how far this contagion is going to reach, there of course is that real risk. And of course, we've talked about several bottom indicators for Bitcoin that are still holding out and have not yet provided that signal, and they were all developed when we were not really knocking on the door of a recession. And so, being somewhat cautious and realistic in 2022 has proven to be quite useful, right? I mean, one of the most common forms of criticism is that I've just been too pessimistic in 2022. But as a reminder, it's not pessimism, it's realism, right? It's just being realistic about things and recognizing that, when the Fed is going on their most aggressive rate hiking cycle ever, and we're fighting high inflation, that it's okay, right? It's okay to be bearish during a time like that, right? It's okay to say no to altcoins and occasionally have to watch counter trend rallies, but to just sort of try to preserve your capital during a macro bear market. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I hopefully it's been a useful strategy to some people. Let's see. Let's see what other questions do we have. If we have any questions in the chat, I'll be happy to answer some questions if you guys have any. Yeah, I know. This is one of the few times I'm doing a live stream when the price isn't actually moving. You know, the price is not actually doing anything. So I figured, hey, why don't we go ahead and do a live stream? Price has been relatively boring. And one of the reasons is because I want people to remember something, and that's that markets bottom on apathy. And arguably there's still a little ways to go with that, but if you can stay the course, right, for the next couple of years, I think you'll be happy with that decision. If you can stay the course. If you capitulate, not necessarily your position, but like if you just simply capitulate by no longer tuning in to things and kind of recognizing really great discounts on various risk assets over the next 12 months, then you might regret that decision in a few years. So I understand that these times can make a lot of people apathetic, and you start to care about other things. And there's really nothing wrong with living your life and doing other things. But try to remember that this is all part of normal cyclical behavior. The high inflation isn't really, I mean, that's not something we've seen in like 40 years, but these bear markets, they occur many, many times, and it can feel like getting through them takes forever. Again, if you look at this current bear market, let's say compare it to the dot-com crash, it looks awful. It looks absolutely awful. If you take the dot-com crash out to its next peak, doesn't look so bad, right? It doesn't look quite as bad. If you take the financial crisis out to its next peak, doesn't look that bad. If you look at it to the bottom, it still looks pretty bleak, right? If it were to continue to follow that. But again, if you take it out to the next peak, it doesn't really look that bad. So, and we could show this comparison, you know, a lot, right? Where you look at the bear market and it feels like it's never going to end. You take it out to the next peak, and you wonder why you spent so much of your time worried about exactly what the market was going to do. I mean, I'll be honest, right? I mean, the S&P still looks like it's in a fairly structural bear market. The bear markets can last 1 year. If it corresponds to a recession, they can last closer to 2 years. If it's like the dot-com bubble, it could last 2.5 to 3 years. I mean, it really just depends on a lot of macro factors that are still slowly working their way out, and we still don't know how long inflation is going to remain entrenched in the system. Hopefully, we see some reprieve from it in 2023, but that still remains to be seen. Please be sure to document the accumulation phase of a lifetime for the coins you're accumulating. Yeah, so everyone keeps asking me like when accumulation phase of a lifetime, and if you think about it, the accumulation phase of a lifetime video that I did back in 2019 and whatnot, this was actually when Ethereum had already bottomed, right? Like so let me explain. Ethereum during the last cycle, when I made that video, it was right. I don't even. I think it was right here actually. It was probably in 2020 when I made it, and it was right here. And I just said, look, it's the accumulation phase of a lifetime. Now I had videos previously in 2019 talking about Ethereum as far back as August and September, somewhere around that time frame of 2019, where I said it's a relatively decent purchase, mainly because the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation was so low. The Ethereum USD valuation was low as well, but I wasn't so concerned about that. I was more so concerned about I thought the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation needed to go up a lot back then. And it did, right? I mean, it actually ended up more or less marking the bottom. If you go look at the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, my first video on my channel is literally right here at this sort of major bottom on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. But the more important thing was that you still, I mean, even though I did not make the accumulation phase of a lifetime on its USD pair at its bottom, I did on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation when I said it was very undervalued. But you have to remember, right? Like by the time I make a video called something like that, the bottom could already be behind us for all we know. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that's the case right now, but I'm just saying like, if you fast forward a few years, let's say 2024, I mean 4 years basically after this phase, the bottom could have already occurred. And so that doesn't necessarily negate that $200 Ethereum was an accumulation phase of a lifetime, but it wasn't the best price, right? I mean, there was also, I was making videos on it down here. I wasn't calling it the accumulation phase of a lifetime, but I was still saying it was undervalued at about 50% of that price. So, I mean, if you're wondering when those types of videos could resurface, I don't think they're going to resurface until late 2023 at the earliest, right? At the earliest would be late 2023. Because these markets just take a long time to unwind, then they take a long time to go sideways, and then they take a long time to go up, right? Like that's just how the cycle works. And you can't really, I mean, front running it hasn't really gotten anyone anywhere this year. Ethereum is still not that far off its lows. Bitcoin is, has continued to put in new lows. So for 2022, right, the general assessment of cash is king, I think is sound. I don't think we're going to regret that at all. And I suppose we'll have to reassess this position in 2023, right? We'll have to reassess it as the markets continue to unwind and we still really figure out how far this contagion effect is going to be felt. But again, right now Bitcoin is less than 17K. So I mean, if you spent all summer freaking out because you weren't the person who bought this bottom, well, congratulations. At your leisure, you could go buy Bitcoin for a price cheaper than anyone could have for the entire summer, right? And again, one of the reasons why we remained bearish throughout this phase was because of all the cyclical indicators saying that, look, it's the same exact thing as we saw back in 2018, right? Like these bottoms in June, and then we bounce up for a while. We put in higher lows. Everyone thinks it's bullish, but really when you put in higher lows in a bear market on these risk assets, it actually tends to be a quite bearish thing. And we've seen this play out time and time again, right? Low in June, higher low, crash in mid-November, right? That was 2018. And we made a video saying, look, guys, same pattern. Probably going to see some type of capitulation in November. Higher low, higher low, higher low. Mid-November comes around. You see that capitulation. You see that move to the downside. So I know a lot of people are hoping that it wasn't going to play out the exact same way. And I mean, so far, it hasn't actually really played out the exact same way. So far, the move to the downside hasn't been quite as bad. It doesn't mean it won't get worse. But so far, it was like, for instance, like November of 2018, Bitcoin dropped about 30%, whereas November of 2022, it dropped closer to around, or sorry, these are weekly candles. Let me go to the monthly candles. November, it actually dropped 30-something%. Yeah, 37%. And then this November, it only dropped 16%. So not as bad of a November as we had back in 2018, but it also doesn't mean that it can't just continue to slowly bleed. One of the interesting things about this bear market is just how painful it's been in terms of just like a slow bleed, just a very slow and painful bleed. And this is one of the reasons why, price-based capitulation and time-based capitulation are both important factors. I mean, again, if the entire market drops 90% at the beginning of the bear and then we just went up after that, it'd be easy, right? You try to hopefully get out before the drop and then you just start buying again and it starts to trim back up. The reason why it's so painful is just because it lasts so long. It lasts a really long time. And as of right now, this is the second longest Bitcoin bear market so far. Okay, it doesn't mean it can't become the longest. It easily could. But if you look at prior Bitcoin bear markets, so the current one is the green line, and the orange line was 2018, and then this one over here was the 2011 bear market. So we're the green line, and then this red line up on top right here is the 2014 bear market. So this bear market has actually not even lasted as long as the 2014 bear market yet. Now remember, the 2014 bear market actually started in November of 2013, just like this one, except November of 2021, and it lasted until January of 2015. So it lasted, for the very end of 2020 or 2013, all of 2014, and then part of 2015. This one so far has lasted for the last part of 2021, basically all of 2022. We'll have to put in a new low at some point for us to say it lasted for the entire 12 months, but it's at least lasted through November so far, with certainly a real risk of putting in a new low eventually. So again, right now, Bitcoin remains in its second longest bear market ever, and we'll continue to see if it wants to follow sort of the blueprint that the 2014 bear market gave us. The biggest difference, David says the biggest difference is that Bitcoin never went through a recession. That's not technically true, though it more or less gets the point across. We actually did have a very brief recession in 2023, but the Fed printed our way out of it relatively quickly. So I do think while it's not technically correct to say that Bitcoin's never experienced one, on a practical level, I think you're right? Like it really hasn't experienced a full recession, and therefore being cautious and just recognizing cash remains king in 2022, I think is quite useful. And then we get out into 2023 and then we reassess and we say, all right, well, now we're out in 2023. Once we get there, then we can sort of reassess where the macro conditions, what they're looking like. Is inflation coming back down? What is the Fed going to do as we get into late 2023 and early 2024? And if you see some type of pivot maybe by the Fed in 2024, I could see that aligning with the next Bitcoin halving, and perhaps we'll see another bull run by that point. But I think it's important for everyone to keep their expectations in check. Normally, after Bitcoin goes down for a year, at the very least, you would expect it to go sideways for a while. And I think we still run the risk of seeing something like that. Someone says, why the live show? Nothing drastic is happening. Why not, right? Why not? Actually, in 2019, I did all sorts of live shows in 2020 where I just played chess and briefly looked at the crypto charts. Maybe I misspoke on a date. I don't know. Some people are saying I said 20. Oh, I meant recession back in 2020, not 2023. I think, assuming we get a recession, I think it's going to last a little while. I don't think it's just going to be as short as the one we had in 2020. Do I think the crypto asset class will continue to perform in the next bull run the same way it did previously? Well, look, I mean, one of the theories that we've had on here forever, and one that has stood the test of time, though not all have, admittedly, is the theory of diminishing returns. And look, it's one of those things that you just kind of have to accept and say it sucks, but it's just the way it is, right? Diminishing returns are a real thing. It takes a lot more money to move the market cap, and therefore we should expect it to continue to operate in that fashion. So, yeah, I mean, I do think crypto will eventually get another bull market, but you could easily still see diminishing returns. It doesn't mean you can't make money. I mean, we called for diminishing returns back in 2019 for the next bull market. People still made a lot of money. Diminishing returns in crypto are still often better than returns elsewhere, as long as you're not YOLOing in every single counter trend rally in the bear market. Again, the reason I say that bear market, I say bull markets make you money, bear markets make you rich. The bear markets make you rich not because you YOLOed in on every counter trend rally, but because you sat cash during the bear market and then waited for the accumulation phase and then slowly start to load up. I think, and I've had to answer that question all year. I mean, even in March, when I was saying, altcoins are too risky, I said in February altcoins are too risky. And some of the most common comments are, well, you say bear markets make you rich, but how do they make you rich if you don't buy the altcoins in the bear market? Most altcoins are down 80 or 90% this year, right? So buying altcoins back in February has not gotten you anywhere. So bear markets make you rich because they lead to the accumulation phase, not because you YOLO'd in every single counter trend rally every step of the way down. Maybe I missed this, but are you following the World Cup? Yeah, I'm following the World Cup to some degree. I think, it looks like, didn't Portugal lose today to South Korea? Yeah, looks like Portugal lost today. South Korea. Yeah, I'm following it. I'll be watching the U.S. tomorrow. Will I wait for Bitcoin dominance to hit a certain target before getting into altcoins? Yeah, probably. It's hard to feel comfortable for me personally getting too heavy into the altcoin market when the dominance is still this low. I know a lot of people say this time is different, but we'll see. Yeah, we might not hit 10 trillion I do think we'll eventually get to 10 trillion. Given that inflation has become quite sticky, yeah, you could argue it still might not even happen next cycle. How many altcoins do I think will be left by the time the bear market ends? Probably still too many. I think 99.99% of the market, honestly, is useless, and there's only a few projects that are actually worthwhile. A lot of projects, remember, they might tout themselves as being great, but a lot of times they're just copied code, and um, it's just a lot of them are just scams, right? I mean, like, guys, I just call it what it is, right? That's why I say don't marry an altcoin. Don't marry an altcoin, because a lot of them, they come and go, and they'll be happy to talk it up in the bull market, but in the bear market they disappear. And if they're anonymous, they'll probably just go quiet and then create a new project in the next bull market. So don't marry an altcoin. A lot of them will never recover, and the few that do are probably quietly building in the bear market, and aren't too concerned about aren't too concerned about it. Someone says they love the S&P 500 videos. Can you do similar videos for the Nasdaq, the Russell? I believe they. Yeah, I mean, I talk more about it on the premium side, even though I don't talk about it a ton. I mean, the Nasdaq still has like really weak, honestly, compared to a lot of the other stocks. Like the Dow Jones has actually been quite strong, but note that even in the 2000, even in the recession in 2000, the bear market of 2000, it would sometimes kind of pop back up and kind of go sideways for a while. Yeah, the Dow has been looking a lot stronger than the Nasdaq, but they both just, I would argue they both just, especially the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq more clearly looks like it's just in a structural bear market. The Dow Jones is kind of just all over the place, but that's kind of what it does. I mean, if you go back to to 2000, it was also sort of just like all over the place and not really putting in a clear structural bear market. Sometimes just coming back up to the prior high before going down and putting in a new low. So yeah, I do think you're right. I mean, it is important to follow traditional markets. I just put out a video on the S&P 500 outlining my thoughts. But yeah, I mean, so far, I briefly cover them every month or two on the channel. So far, the general assessment of it just being a bear market has paid off. What do I think about earning yield on a small portion of your Bitcoin stack? I mean, look, guys, I don't really think, honestly, like, I don't think it's worth it, right? I mean, I just don't. Not right now. It doesn't mean it won't ever be, but you could make the case that that is the best idea. Is it worth losing all of your Bitcoin for something that you just is unforeseen, just so you can get a little bit of yield? I'll leave that up to you. But in a bear market, you don't know what companies are solvent. You don't know what code has been audited properly. You just don't know. And in bear markets, the markets have a way of sniffing out the weakness. And once a weakness is sniffed out, the market goes after it, right? It goes after it and it's unrelenting. We saw that happen with FTX, right? Once the market sniffed it out, it did not take long for everything to come collapsing down with that. So I would say, it is just simply not worth the risk. There's plenty of reasons why bear markets suck. Plenty of reasons why bear markets suck. Even as someone who's been stacking cash, right? Like it still sucks because like I want to get back into wealth creation mode and not wealth preservation mode, because I feel like when you're in wealth preservation mode, things just aren't as exciting, right? Like you're just trying to keep your wealth at the level that it was before the bear market started, which is often quite difficult, especially if you're diversified upon in various asset classes that are struggling. But I would like to get back to wealth creation mode, but it's just really difficult. I mean, even if you recognize that cash is king and have been stacking cash, like it still sucks. And because bear markets already suck, having your Bitcoin on some type of platform that ends up taking it away from you, like you don't need that to worry about, right? So bear markets are already hard enough. There's no sense in worrying, in my opinion, about whether you actually get to keep your Bitcoin because some other greedy person decided they wanted to take risky bets with it that don't really work out. How am I still making updates with a little one on the way? Well, the new baby is not born yet, so I still might have another week or two before the baby is born. So new life. is coming in my family soon enough. Hopefully, new life in the cryptoverse as well at some point. But um, yeah, I mean, Philip's right. You could lose 100% on an exchange. It's just not worth it, right? I mean, how many times have you guys ever seen me shill an exchange or a centralized platform with affiliate? I don't do that stuff because I don't trust a lot of it. I mean, there's just so many untrustworthy actors in the space that it's just simply not worth it. And I mean, look at what happened with FTX. Like they had really high paid. I mean, they had some pretty famous spokespeople for that company promoting it, and now they're defending it. And I mean, where has that gotten them? Right? Where has that gotten them? Nowhere. So, and I tweeted about this recently too. When scammers are found out, I think it's appropriate for the cryptoverse to chew them up and spit them out and move on. And I think we're better off for it. To give them any future relevance in the crypto space, other than just trying to figure out what exactly went wrong and accountability and stuff. I think to give them any type of future relevance is a huge mistake. What's your opinion on the metaverse? My general opinion on the metaverse, and I actually said this back in 2021 on some of the live shows we did on Fridays. Um, I think the metaverse is ahead of its time. I think that it's probably we're getting a glimpse of it right now, but I still think it's so early. It doesn't mean you're going to have to wait forever to make money on that play, but I think about it like this, right? I think about the metaverse like this. I'm just being honest, right? Um, I think it's probably something that my kids will be a lot more interested in than me, right? Like to be completely honest, right? It's like it's like how like your grandparents or whatever didn't really care that much for the internet, and then like my parents were able to adapt to the internet, but then like my generation, we grew up on the internet, and like the generation younger than me, right? So like, kids born today, they're growing up with I mean, of course, the internet, but a lot more than I mean, who remembers dial up, right? Like AOL online. I mean, like you've got mail, right? Like those were the days, right? So like I kind of equate it to like the metaverse is kind of the thing that um like my parents or my parents' generation will probably almost never use. It'll probably be something that my generation can somewhat adapt to, but it's probably not something we like. It's not something that we like grew up on or anything like that. It's something that's there and we might use it. I think my kids' generation will be the generation where really the metaverse is a much bigger deal. So my general assessment of the metaverse is this. I mean, just to put a nice bow on it, I think it's honestly probably 5 or 10 years away from being an actual thing that people use. I do think the metaverse is probably under development, the one that will eventually be used or at least will be in the planning stages relatively soon. Is it going to be Meta? Like, is it going to be Facebook? I don't know. I mean, it could be, or it could be another company that Meta buys out. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's probably about 5 to 10 years ahead of its time. So, and I'll say this again, like I don't know how much of a user I'll be of the metaverse, but I will be an investor in it, right? I mean, like I'll try to make money on it, that's for sure. But I don't know if I'll be like a, I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll see how useful it is. No, I was born in 1990. If that gives you any idea. Sorry, so I probably should have said that right. I'm a 90s kid. So when I'm talking about generations, like I was born in the 90s. And I mean, I think if the metaverse were like a delivered product today, then it would be easy for to get into it. But it's like if it doesn't come around um, in any useful way until I'm 40 or something, then I mean, it's probably something that my generation can adapt to, but and something that our parents' generation uh, mostly avoids. Um, did I play Pokemon Red or Blue? I played Blue. I have a twin brother though. You might be interested to know. I have a twin brother and he played Red. I was always Pokemon Blue. The 10 year and the 3 month. Someone says the spread on the 10 year and the 3 month is negative 82 basis points. Yeah, I mean, look, we've said this before. It looks like a pretty clear indication of an upcoming recession. I mean, I suppose the biggest counterpoints to that are that, like we've just gone into a new regime of monetary policy, and that the old ways can't really be useful in predicting what's going to happen. Or it could just be this time is not different, and these spreads on the 3 month and the 10 year, just like historical spreads where we go inversion. I mean, the inversion of the 3 month and the 10 year. Historically, we get a recession within like 3 to 12 months or something. I mean, it really depends, but I think we're likely going to see it in 2023. Um, I think the only way you don't see it in 2023 is if something like this happens, where we just sort of get to the bottom and then go sideways for a long time, and then finally start to see it uninvert in late 2023, and then maybe it happens in early 2024, maybe 4 years after the last one, right, in early 2020. But it still seems like a recession is coming. It's just a matter of time. But remember, by the time the economy really feels the effects, the risk assets will have likely already bottomed. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're not subscribed, and give the video a thumbs up. Yeah, we have only 549 likes. Make sure you guys give the video a thumbs up. Here's a fun fact. So I mentioned that I'm a twin. I'm actually married to someone who's a triplet. So that's another fun fact. Someone says, just checking in. What did I miss? Honestly, you didn't really miss anything. Um, what's the sex of the new kid? It's going to be a girl. Someone says it looks like the Fed is going to cut rates at 2024 halving. Has this ever happened before? Um, well, I mean, the thing is I mean, for the most part, rates have just been zero, right, or close to zero for the last year. There was a period of time where they did raise them and then cut them. I mean, like, look, so Bitcoin basically started existing way back over here, right? Like right over here. I mean, it was sort of born out of the financial crisis. And the rates were basically zero for the most part until 2015. And they went up and then they came back down in 2019. So for the most part, Bitcoin has existed during basically zero rates or very briefly elevated rates. And it's interesting because when the Fed raised rates over here, Bitcoin still went up. But I think the issue is that they rose the rate um, at the at an appropriate time. The economy was strong, and the economy could take it. Now they're doing it. They really should have raised rates last year, is what they should have done. They should have raised rates in 2021. I think they were still too worried about the effects of the pandemic, and they didn't want to get too aggressive. But I mean, the problem is normally when they raise rates, the stock market's going up. So they do it into a strong economy. They do it into a strong stock market. This time they're raising rates and the stock market's going down, and the economy is sort of spiraling downward as inflation continues to run rampant. So there are certainly some differences. Any chance? Someone asked if is there any chance the Bitcoin halving doesn't happen every 4 years? No, I mean, it should happen in early 2024. Each time it gets a little earlier in the year. So, like, if you think back to 2012, it was like the end of 2012. And then 2016, it was in like sort of like the late summer, and then like in July, and then in 2020, it was in May. So, I mean, this one's probably going to be a little bit earlier in the year. So, it'll probably be sometime early 2024. It's also, I keep saying, it's not the happening. It's just the having, right? It's the having. Someone says, isn't it ironic that the idea of cryptocurrencies are decentralization and yet Bitcoin is the one crypto that controls the whole market? Well, I mean, the problem is a lot of the cryptocurrencies are dinos, right? Decentralized in name only. Just because something calls itself a cryptocurrency doesn't make it decentralized, right? If a team can at will turn, turn it off and on, if it can stop and be restarted constantly, if you can lie about how many total tokens are in circulation, if if you can do things like all of that, then it's not decentralized, right? I mean, you can call it what you want. Doesn't mean it's true. This doesn't mean it's true, right? So be careful with assuming that every all these cryptocurrencies are decentralized, because the truth is they're not, and they can call themselves one, but I said, right, decentralized in name only. The acronym there is a dino, and you guys know what happened to dinos. You know what happened to the dinosaurs. They died off eventually. So if it's decentralized in name only, um, I really fail to see how it. I don't. I'm not saying that these projects can't do some things, but they're not for the purposes that crypto was really created, right? Like they're trying to fulfill some other purpose, and that's like a different investment thesis that's separate from the investment thesis of investing in decentralized protocols. But yeah, a lot of projects are simply decentralized in name only, and that's as far as their decentralization goes. In a previous video, you mentioned that Bitcoin is usually right around the fair value at the halving. What is the estimated fair value? Well, I mean, I'm going to have to, I mean, as I said, I'll have to refit the logarithmic regression curve. It has to be done at the end of every bear market. But yeah, I mean, we'll have to see exactly where it comes in. I don't know exactly where it's going to come in. I have videos on it. Could be 30K or something. Sorry, there's someone outside. If it gets kind of loud, that's the reason. I might have to go in a minute because there's like someone outside with like blowing leaves. Someone says that monthly candle would suggest more downside for Bitcoin. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, sorry, that's loud. Honestly, the monthly candle, does not look that bullish. If it had come back up or something by the end of the month, then it would have looked better. But I mean, this is not really the most bullish looking monthly close. No, that's not the sound of the money printer, unfortunately. Someone asked if that's the sound of the money printer. Yeah, another thing I like to look at, honestly, are 6 month candles. Let me show you something that's kind of interesting. It helps keep expectations in check. If you look at 6 month candles, it takes about 3 red ones before you get another bull market. Historically, anyway, the last 2 bear markets, right? 3 6 month red candles. Here we had 2 in a row, and then we had a break, and then we had our third one before the next bull market, right? So 3 red 6 month candles before the next bull seems to be a fairly interesting observation, right? 1 2 3. This one was 1 2, took a break, then a third one, then the bull market. So far, we're in our second 6 month candle that is red, and this candle opened up at looks like it opened up at 19.9, and we're currently at 16.9. So again, I mean, if we're destined to have another 6 month red candle at the very least before another bull market, either good chance either the first half of 2023 is going to be red, or the second half of 2023 is going to be red. And if you look at monthly Heikin-Ashi candles for Bitcoin, it's just been nothing but red since December of 2021, right? I mean, I think these candles are actually quite useful, right? I mean, like, if once they hit, usually the trend lasts for a while, and this has been going on for a long time. We should see some green in 2023 at some point, but so far, I mean, 2022 has just been straight up red. Someone says a noise canceling mic would help. Yeah, but we're not going to have that. I'm just using the internal microphone on my laptop. Everyone that you don't actually have to have any great production set or anything like that to make videos. So if that's your excuse on not making videos, it's a pretty bad excuse. This is my laptop internal mic and the laptop webcam. Do an updated video on when Bitcoin can realistically reach $1 million. I did. So if you're not familiar, I put out a video back in like 2019 or 2020 saying when can Bitcoin realistically hit 1 million, and I said around 2040 is when it could realistically hit 1 million. I think I'm just gonna stand by that. I think if you guys watch the video, I think I said the earliest it could happen would be like 2038, and it might even be like 2041 or something. And this is of course assuming it continues its adoption curve. So I would say probably around the year 2040 is when it could realistically get to those levels. What recording software do I use? OBS. I mean, it's free, so you don't really need anything fancy. What about 3 month Heikin-Ashi candles? I don't know. I don't know if I've ever looked at 3 month Heikin-Ashi candles. This is what they look like. So this bear market was 4 in a row. This one was 4 in a row, followed by 2 green and then 2 more red. We're currently looking at 4 so far. I do think 2023 we will see some green, right? I want to be clear. I think 2023 we will see some green. I don't think that I think there will be parts of 2023 that we will actually go up, and it won't just be like a pathetic rally. It'll actually be a decent rally, but it's still not 2023 yet. So yeah, I mean, it's based on models. The idea of going to 1 million sort of assumes that we don't just stagnate for a while. I mean, if we stagnate for a while, then of course that would affect things. Yeah, remember, like if Bitcoin does go to $1 million eventually, $1 million will probably mean a lot different than what it means today, just because of inflation. Someone says rate cuts do not always save markets. Yeah, I mean, most of the time, if you look at when the Fed cuts rates, they usually cut it after they realize they've done too much damage to the economy. And normally, the markets bottom after the last rate cut is normally what is if you go look at the charts. Like normally, it's after the last rate cut that the market bottoms, not on the first rate cut. And this is what history shows us, anyways. I mean, you could argue anything you want to. That's just what historically happens. But also, what historically happens is they raise rates when the market's going up, not when it's going down. What do I think about the possibility of an S curve price? I don't. So I think some people are talking about um, for it to come up like this and then go up like I don't really think that's the case. I mean, I just sort of think it's just a long game here. I don't see it accelerating higher, because it's just going to take more and more money to move the market, and that just really does not fundamentally make sense to me. Do I think Bitcoin will ever replace money as we know it? No, not really. I mean, I don't think we're going to be going around buying coffee with Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean Bitcoin doesn't have a place. I do think Bitcoin has a place. I don't think it's going to be like a peer-to-peer currency that everyone's going to use. It's just going to be something where you keep it and you hold on to it, and it slowly goes up in value is the idea. But I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to trade actively. I mean, the thing, or spend. The thing is like in order to encourage spending, you sort of need inflation, right? Like, so think about it like that, right? Like from a fundamental perspective, why do we spend cash, right? Why do we go out and spend our US dollars or our euros or whatever it is? It's because it's probably going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today, right? So like you're not as encouraged to save that. Now, right now, cash is king, and so I mean, right now, I think it has been a great idea over the last year. I think it's been great to save your cash and try to get yield on it, through various ways. But normally, be honest, like I mean, most people aren't going to go out and want to trade in their Bitcoin for food or something like that, because a lot of people are under the impression that Bitcoin should be worth more tomorrow than it is today. And if you think something's going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today, you're likely not going to want to get rid of it, right? But when you go out to the store and you buy groceries, I mean, your money is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. So it sort of encourages spending. So I don't really think Bitcoin is honestly, I really don't think it's going to be like a future peer to peer where everyone uses it for everything. I think that's probably not going to be true. That doesn't mean it doesn't have utility. It doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. I do think it has a future, but I just don't think it's going to be because of that. Yeah, I see some people disagreeing, but I mean, how many people here actually go out? And maybe I'm wrong, right? I mean, how many people actually here go out and use Bitcoin to buy things? Like, I feel like most people just buy Bitcoin as an investment, not to actually use it to go buy things. And I'm talking about like on like a weekly basis or an everyday basis, not maybe something you did like one time or something. But if are there a lot of people that actually do that? Someone says they do, but they replace it. It's a fair response. Yeah, so I mean, it seems like most people don't. Um, I mean, I've had this opinion for years. I don't know why it's surprising. I've said before, right? I mean, like if crypto is going to sort of take over everyday spending, it's probably because you're just using your stable coins to buy things, right? I mean, that are pegged to something else, um, not Bitcoin. Because you, if you think Bitcoin's just going to go up in value or something, you're probably not going to want to spend it. What do I think about Bitcoin dominance? It's still slowly trending higher if you exclude stablecoins, so there's that. But yeah, I mean, right now it still sits pretty low when you include stablecoins, and even if you exclude stablecoins, it's still relatively low, even though it's still been moving higher. If a Fed pivot shows up, how will it affect Bitcoin price? Um, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what it'll do on that day. I think a Fed pivot will actually be really good for Bitcoin, or it will lead to another bull market. Whether it starts immediately or not is hard to say, but I do think eventually a Fed pivot would be a good thing. Someone says, with a halving coming 2 months earlier, do we expect to have an earlier bull market? You could argue we had an earlier bull market last cycle. I mean, there's still a lot of evidence to suggest that this was the top over here back in April of 2021, and this was sort of just like an over leveraged, you know, pump uh, that we sort of willed our way to. But you could argue the bull market really ended back in April of 2021, and that it came well before the end of the year, like we had seen back in 2017. Historically, there's always a dump after the Fed pivot. Yeah, I mean, like if you look at traditional markets, there's usually a dump after the Fed pivot. That's true. That's an accurate statement, and you could see that happen with Bitcoin as well. The counterpoint is that the last time that the S&P put in a lower low, Bitcoin did not put in a lower low, right? So Bitcoin was actually showing relative strength until what happened with FTX, right? But before that, the S&P put in a new low, but Bitcoin did not. So I mean, I think that's also something you should consider. What are some tips for beginning a crypto YouTube channel? Yeah, I just say just stick with it throughout the bear market, and people will appreciate that in the bull market. The YouTubers that sort of just show up in the bull market, they're just chasing the trend, right? I mean, it's basically as bad as the late investors, right? You're just chasing the trend. You gotta put in the work when you know when no one when really most a lot of people don't care, because the few people that do care that will appreciate you the most are still around now. The tourists will always come and go. When is Ethereum heading home? That's a good question. It's been pretty stubborn. It's been pretty stubborn so far. It's getting close though. It's not too far away from home. You can see it's still sitting just above the regression line here. It's getting pretty close. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're not subscribed, and give the video a thumbs up. Um, yeah, Bitcoin's still sitting just below 17K. Um, Yields are up today. Unemployment data came in low. So yields are up, probably because it means the Fed can continue to just hike for a while longer. Yeah, another green light for Powell is true. They still might only do 50 basis points. I mean, if you go look at the watch tool over here, still think there's like, yeah, like an 80% chance that they're gonna 79% chance they're gonna go with 50 basis points. The only thing that I think could really affect this between now and then is the next CPI report that comes out like the day before the next interest rate hike. So, the next couple of weeks should be interesting, to say the least. Someone says they had the idea of starting a no-nonsense, realistic crypto YouTube channel, but then they discovered mine. You do a good job. Like, yeah, but see, here's the thing. Like, just because someone does a good job doesn't mean that you couldn't provide a perspective that I don't provide, right? So, um, and that's something I think a lot of people struggle with is you look at something and you think the market is saturated. When I started when I started this YouTube channel, there are still tons of people making content on crypto. And I really struggled to come to terms with like, who's going to care about what I have to say. I'm just some nobody. I kind of still am, right? Um, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. I think crypto deserves, in general, as a whole, I'm not saying there aren't good content creators because there are. There are plenty of them. But as a whole, I think crypto deserves better content creators and people who have a moral compass. I think the crypto community deserves that. So if you want to make crypto videos and you can provide that, then just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean you're not going to have a worthwhile take, is my opinion. The crypto market might be saturated with scammy shilling type crypto content. It might be saturated with that, but I don't think it's saturated with actually useful, well-intentioned content. So I think you should consider that. Can mining be worthless in the long term? I think it'll make a comeback. I mean, I do think we could be looking at some type of minor capitulation. Um, Probably the best evidence or some of the evidence for something like that is if you look at the Pule multiple, which is a good measure of minor profitability, right? So looking at minor profitability, you can see that it historically bottoms at around 0.3 or so. Right now, it's actually sitting at 0.573. Historical bottoms occur typically at around zero point 0.3 all the way down here, right? Like look at 2011, 2015, and 2018. We still haven't really gone down to that level yet this cycle. So I still think miners are going to be under some pressure, at least for the next few months. But the cycle has a way of eventually resetting. Would I swap my Ethereum to Bitcoin due to Ethereum risk of being a security? Look, guys, I've thought for like at least the last 6 months that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation was going to go down, right? I mean, I put out a video when it was like 0.075 back in May saying that it was standing on a cliff and it was going to go down, and then it did, and I felt like a genius, and then it went back up, you know, um, and now after all of that, it still basically sits around that same level, right? I mean, because this is where I thought it was going to go down, right here. I have some videos on my channel right here saying Ether Bitcoin's going to go down, and it did. And then I got a little too, probably too a little full of myself, and it came back up. And once I recognized it was going to go up, I was like, all right, well, I'll probably pump into the merge and then start going down again. And it has. I mean, so far it's just putting in higher lows, but I mean, if you would have asked my opinion, I would have thought it was going to go down 6 months ago and stay down, but it hasn't. So, my opinion, at least in the short term, it was right, but in the medium term, it was arguably wrong. It was really misplaced. Someone says the next Bitcoin all-time high will be 120 to 200K. It is possible. I will say this: my predictions for the next bull market, um, I think should be somewhat tempered. And I mean, I said this back in 2019 as well, and a lot of people wanted 300K Bitcoin and stuff. And admittedly, I did think we would make it to 100K. I thought it would take until 2023. That clearly did not happen, right? Like we're nowhere close. But yeah, I think it makes sense to temper your expectations for sure. Yeah, I mean the problem with predictions is that everyone wants them in the bear market and the accumulation. I mean everyone always wants predictions, right? But most predictions are just useless. I mean they just are. What's your next speculation on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation? It hasn't changed, right? I still think it probably needs to go down. Is it going to have another spike up before that happens? I don't know. I've thought it was going to go down since May. Um, yeah, the problem. I mean, I know a lot of people are really excited about Ethereum in the short term and stuff, but I mean, it still remains just in a fairly structural bear market, right? Like this is just a clear textbook bear market by Ethereum, just clear rejections off the bear market resistance band, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's sort of getting squeezed between this bear market resistance band and the lower logarithmic regression band fit to, again, quote unquote non-bubble data. So I mean, it still just remains in a fairly textbook bear market as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if it were to surprise to the upside, then maybe I'd have to reconsider. But I mean, so far it's just been a textbook bear market. Um, Bob Lucas has suggested 2024-2028 cycle will be muted. Which do you think will be the dud? I think the I don't really know. I mean, I think that with how bad everything is in the macro right now, like you could make the case that this one will be the one that will be tempered, and then the next one will be the one that is a bit more optimistic if we can come out of some of the macro headwinds. Um, the biggest counterpoint to that statement would be, well, unemployment remains low, and if inflation comes back down quickly, and the Fed stops raising rates, and the economy is still putting in new real GDP highs, then I mean you could argue that the recession doesn't have to occur, and then maybe it just kicks the can down the road a few years, and then we get a nasty recession, and that's probably the biggest counterpoint to it. But I don't know. I mean, right now, a lot of signs still point to a recession in 2023, 2024. But even if we get a recession by then, we could still see a bull market in later 2024, 2025. Do I think it's possible for Bitcoin to go to 18K before December 13th? Well, I mean, if you're asking me, can Bitcoin rally $1,000 in 10 days? I mean, the answer is always going to be yes. It doesn't mean it has to, but I mean, it certainly could, and it could do it based on nothing more than, um, shorts getting liquidated, right? A short squeeze. It doesn't have to be anything fundamental. I mean, of course, Bitcoin always reserves the right to move by $1,000 in any direction it wants to. Anna says by the time they call it a recession, it will be the bottom. It's probably true, and yeah, there's a lot of merit to that, and a lot of evidence to suggest that by the time they actually get around to calling it a recession, the bottom's usually closed. And if you look back, the bottom normally occurs during the recession. But the problem is when the recession starts, they don't declare it a recession when the recession starts. They normally backdate it a couple quarters or something. So like imagine they declare a recession in Q3 of 2023, maybe they would then backdate it a couple quarters, and then you could argue that the recession or the bear market was already over or something. That's why normally by the time people start talking about it and we actually in one, the market's normally close to a bottom. What percent of the indicators you care most about say the bottom for Bitcoin is not in? I think there's I wouldn't say anything I care most about. I mean, it's just I have a risk indicator that sort of weights all of them equally. There still are a few, right? The Peel multiple remains off its market cycle bottom levels. The supply and profit and loss are the 30-day SMA of it arguably has not crossed yet. All market cycle bottoms have historically occurred after they cross. So like if you go look at um, the Bitcoin supply and profit and loss, and you take like a 30-day SMA of this, you can see that historic bottoms occur after they cross and not before they cross, and they still have not crossed yet. So this is an indicator that I still think is keeping me cautious on. I mean, like there's been so many people that have called the bottom literally every month for like the last 10 months. But there are indicators that still suggest like there is a reason to be cautious, right? These indicators were built during a secular bull market. So why would they not cross when we're looking at a bear market? Um, so you have that one. You have the Peel multiple, which I already mentioned. This one. And it might be better to apply like a 7-day SMA to it. And you can see if you look at like the 7-day SMA, we're still well off market cycle bottoms for the Peel multiple, which is a measure of miner profitability. And then the other one is the balance price. Normally, Bitcoin sees daily closes below the balance price, right? Like Exhibit A, B, and C. But so far, we have not put in daily closes below the balance price. We have put in wicks below it right here, but we have not put in daily closes below it. And historically, market cycle bottoms have occurred on daily closes below the balance price. Um, and I mean, honestly, as we get further and further into the bear market, the bears will lose steam. Here's a good way to visualize that. Look at the 30-day SMA of supply and profit and loss over the last like year. And this orange line is a good measure of like the bears had a lot of power back up here. And then the bulls took over for a little bit. And then the bears had some power, but they had less power here than they had on the initial rundown, right? Less power, and then the bulls came back. And then the bears took over again, but they had even less power than the previous time. And now we're going down again. So eventually you get to the point where the bears just don't have enough momentum anymore, and the people that used to be bears now become bulls, and we start to cycle over again. But you can really visualize it really well with something like this, where you can kind of see the bears are losing steam as the bear market goes on. It doesn't mean the bear market's over, but it means that we're probably getting we're getting close, right? We're getting close. There's a few other ones. I mean, you could look at the MVRVZ score and look at historic bottoms here and argue that we're still off of historic bottoms. The counterpoint is that historically we actually go a little bit higher each cycle. But with that said, I mean, like the MVRVZ score still has room to potentially move down a little bit to hit more historic bottoms. If this were already the bottom, you probably would just say it's close enough. Um, but hopefully, I mean, hopefully these indicators are useful, and hopefully I answered your question uh, as how you wanted it to be answered. Do I think the FTX debacle and what's going on with the government and media is peak clown work? I mean, I think the idea of I think a lot of what's being said is very carefully crafted, um, and like I don't. There are a lot of things to me that just don't make sense. Like how do you misplace like $1 billion, right? Like this, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. And I have to wonder, to me, ignorance is no excuse, right? And you could argue whether it's ignorant or not, but even if it was ignorance or even if it was incompetence, it's still no excuse, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The end result was the same. So, what did I study in university? Math for undergrad, nuclear engineering for grad school. What are the chances we are in for a decade-long bear market? I don't think we're going to be in a decade-long bear market. I mean, it might be a while before we see new highs, but I mean most bear markets tend to last like even some of the worst bear markets that the S&P has experienced were only 2 or 3 years. They weren't 10 years, so I don't think it'll be a 10-year bear market. Um, yeah, I mean, look, 20. I know these things can feel like they take a while, but you kind of blink, and then the next halving is going to be here. A year from now, we're going to be knocking on the door of the next halving, and hopefully, inflation's back down, and the Fed's not so hawkish. Though Powell has been a little bit more dovish recently. Digital Asset News says Wind Moon. Rob, it's a good question. Probably not today. Um, what other things do we have? All right, guys. I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. We've been going for a while, actually. We don't even normally do live streams this long. This was a 72-minute live stream, it looks like. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. We also do have Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We have several tiers. You can check that out.